Coventry, England. September 1939. A strange little machine rumbles off the assembly line at the Daimler works on Radford Road, still carrying the faint scent of fine leather from the luxury cars normally built there. At just 4 feet 11 inches tall and barely 10 feet 5 inches long, it weighs a mere 3 tons, lighter than a fully loaded London taxi. 2 men squeeze inside, hunched beneath a thick slab of armored steel, squinting out through vision slits no wider than a mail slot. There is no turret, no cannon. Just a single Bren machine gun poking shyly through the front plate. It looked like a toy. Senior officers walked around it, shaking their heads. "What on earth is this supposed to do?" they asked. "Too small to fight, too lightly armed to hold ground, too cramped even to carry decent supplies." In the War Office, skeptics dismissed it as a criminal waste of good steel. They were wrong, spectacularly so. Over the next 6 years, this unassuming little vehicle would fight its way across France, North Africa, Italy, Normandy, Belgium, Holland, and deep into Germany itself. It would serve with more than a dozen regiments on 3 continents. Its mechanical reliability became legendary. Crews would drag wrecked examples out of scrapyards and rebuild them rather than wait for factory replacements. It was so low and so quick that enemy gunners often couldn't even get a bead on it. The Italians were so impressed that when they captured one in the desert, they took it apart bolt by bolt and built their own copy. No serious replacement was even considered until 7 years after the war ended. Officially, it was called the Daimler Scout car. But to every soldier who ever rode in one, from private to general, it was simply the Dingo. And by almost universal agreement, it was the finest scout car of the Second World War. To understand why the Dingo existed, you have to go back to the uneasy summer of 1938. The Munich Agreement had bought Britain a little breathing room, but it had also exposed a harsh truth. War was coming, and the British Army was dangerously unprepared. One of the most glaring gaps was reconnaissance. Cavalry regiments trading in their horses for armored vehicles desperately needed a small, fast, stealthy machine that could slip forward, find the enemy, and slip away again without being noticed. Existing options were too tall, too slow, or too fragile. So the War Office drew up a tough specification. The new vehicle must stand less than 6 feet high, weigh under 3 tons, hit more than 50 miles per hour, and feature 4-wheel drive with independent suspension. 3 companies threw their hats into the ring. Alvis submitted a promising design they cheekily named the Dingo, after the Australian wild dog. It was fast, but dangerously top-heavy. Morris Commercial fell short on speed and was eliminated. Then came BSA Cycles, a subsidiary of the Birmingham Small Arms Company, with a prototype finished in September 1938. By December, that prototype had already clocked 10,000 miles over every kind of terrain with almost no mechanical trouble. Midway through the contest, the War Office toughened the requirements, demanding heavier armor and a roof. BSA adapted quickly. Their design won. Here the story takes a wonderfully British twist. The name Dingo actually belonged to the losing Alvis prototype. Yet somehow the name jumped ship and attached itself permanently to the BSA Daimler winner. The official title remained Daimler Scout Car, but from the moment it reached the troops, everyone simply called it the Dingo. The driving force behind the design was engineer Sid Shellard and his team at BSA. Production was entrusted to Daimler, the luxury car arm of the group with the expertise to build it properly. The first order for 172 vehicles was placed in May 1939. Just 22 had been delivered by the end of the year. What made the Dingo special was its silhouette. At under 5 feet tall, it crouched lower than a dining table. This was made possible by a clever H-drive layout. Instead of a conventional props haft running under the floor, which would have forced the crew compartment higher, power was delivered through separate left and right propeller shafts from a central transfer box to each wheel. The result was a completely flat underside that let the little car glide over rough ground while keeping the crew extraordinarily low. At its heart sat a Wilson pre-selector epicyclic gearbox mated to a Daimler fluid flywheel, technology borrowed from the company's luxury cars. 2 B-shaped elements filled with light oil transmitted power hydraulically, with no mechanical contact between them. No clutch to wear out. No stalling. And best of all, near-silent operation. For a vehicle meant to sneak up on the enemy, silence wasn't a luxury, it was the whole point. The Dingo had 5 forward and 5 reverse gears. Even better, the entire gearbox could be reversed through the transfer box, allowing the car to sprint backward at nearly full speed, up to 40 miles per hour in reverse. The driver's seat was cleverly angled so he could glance over his shoulder through a hinged flap while backing away from trouble. And the thickest armor, 30 mm, was placed right at the front, exactly where it mattered most when the crew was beating a hasty retreat. Early Mark I's even had four-wheel steering, giving a turning circle tighter than most family cars, though this was later dropped because it proved tricky for inexperienced wartime drivers. The philosophy was simple: the Dingo wasn't built to fight. It was built to see without being seen, then disappear. A turret would have added height, weight, and silhouette. So the designers left it out. A single .303 Bren gun was all the protection the crew needed. The Dingo first saw action in April 1940 with the British Expeditionary Force in France. It was a harsh debut. Within weeks, the BEF was falling back toward Dunkirk, and many Dingoes were abandoned on the beaches. But they had shown enough promise in those frantic days to earn their place in the British Army's future. It was in the vast emptiness of the North African desert that the Dingo truly made its reputation. The 11th Hussars, the cherry pickers, became forever linked with the little car, using it as the eyes of the legendary 7th Armored Division, the Desert Rats. Other units, the King's Dragoon Guards, the Royal Dragoons, and the Derbyshire Yeomanry, also relied on them across Libya, Egypt, and Tunisia. In that open landscape, the Dingo's tiny profile made it almost invisible against scrub, dunes, and tall grass. Enemy gunners struggled to track something so low, moving at over 50 miles per hour, and capable of vanishing backward just as quickly. The standard tactic was brutally effective: creep forward, observe, radio the sighting, then slam the gearbox into reverse and back away at speed with 30 mm of armor facing the threat. Thanks to the fluid flywheel, the transition was instantaneous and eerily smooth. The little car proved so dependable that the Royal Engineers even adapted some for minefield reconnaissance and bridge scouting, roles far beyond its original brief. In the mountains and narrow lanes of Italy, its compact size allowed it to go places larger armored cars simply couldn't reach. In Normandy's deadly bocage country, where every hedge hid an ambush, the Dingo's low silhouette and agility saved countless crews. Once the breakout came in August 1944, Dingoes raced ahead of the advancing columns, finding gaps in the collapsing German lines during the Great Dash toward Belgium. Perhaps its most surprising role came with the airborne forces. 2 Dingoes could fit inside a single Horsa glider, making it the most heavily armored vehicle available to British paratroopers. By the war's end, the 11th Hussars Dingoes were still leading the way, rolling into Hamburg with the 7th Armored Division in May 1945. The same type of vehicle that had retreated from France 5 years earlier was now among the first Allied units to reach Belsen concentration camp and link up with Soviet forces on the Baltic coast. In total, 6,626 Dingoes were built across 5 marks between 1939 and 1945, one of the few British vehicles in continuous production throughout the entire war. This was achieved despite the Daimler factory in Coventry being hit by over 150 high-explosive bombs, 3 parachute mines, and 17 delayed action bombs during the Blitz. When the works was devastated in 1941, production was simply scattered to a hosiery factory, an underwear mill, and an agricultural equipment plant. Remarkably, output actually increased. The Italians paid the Dingo the highest possible compliment. They captured one, reverse-engineered it completely, and built 129 near-identical copies called the Autoblinder Linz, which served with both Italian and German forces from 1943 onward. No other scout car of the era combined the Dingo's low profile, frontal armor, mechanical refinement, and quiet speed quite so effectively. The German SDKFZ 222 was more heavily armed but taller, heavier, less reliable, and far noisier, better suited to fighting than pure stealthy reconnaissance. The American M3A1 was essentially an armored truck, and the Soviet BA-64 was taller and more lightly protected. The Dingo wasn't powerful, glamorous, or heavily armed. It was simply small, quiet, fast, low, and almost impossible to kill. It did exactly what a scout car was supposed to do: find the enemy, report what it saw, and bring its 2-man crew home alive. That wasn't luck. It was masterful British engineering.